Well, I'm doing something I have not done in a very long time. It's called preaching from a chair. Now, I'm going to get it out of the way with so there's no more distractions. You know that song, I'm not as young once as I ever was, but I'm as young once as I've ever been, or something like that. That's me. I joined a men's hockey league, and it's been great. We're 5 weeks in, and I think I blew my ACL out. So there's no big deal on that. Somebody said, you're going to go get it checked out. I don't even have a doctor here. We've been here almost 3 years. I've not been to a doctor. I don't have a family doctor. So we'll figure it out as we go. Normally, I move around a lot, and so today I'm going to sit. But I wanted to give that disclaimer and get it out of the way because I really believe that this teaching today can change your life. I actually believe that this teaching can change this message that God has given us, and myself included, can revolutionize your relationships. And so I had to give the disclaimer why I'm sitting, so you're not like, why is he sitting and not moving? That's why I'm old, all right? Now, we are in our third week of a series called Keep It Together. And the premise has been when pressure pulls you apart, when life pulls you apart, when worries pull you apart, what can keep us together? And week one, we looked at character. Our character can help keep us together. Last week, we looked at the compass. Like, what do we follow? What's our anchor point? Where are we going? That helps keep us together. But today, I want to talk about conflict. How do we keep it together in the middle of conflict? When there's conflict, when there's fighting, when there's disagreement, when there's arguing, when there's bickering. Like, that always is going to happen. In your life, in my life, in our life, we will always have conflict. But I also think about the life of Jesus. Jesus lived in constant conflict. He lived in constant tension. He lived in constant disagreement and disruptions. It's interesting, if you read the narratives of Jesus in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 183 times he was asked a question. If you read through it, that's a lot of questions. More often than not, the people weren't asking for clarity. The people were asking for conflict, to trap him, to trip him up, to pigeonhole him into a crucifixion. Of the 183 questions that he was asked, he only answered 3 directly. Think about that. He's asked 183, but only 3 times does he point blank give the response without a narrative, a story, a parable, an explanation. Only 3 times. Now, on the flip side, he himself asked 307 questions. Do you know why? Because Jesus was constantly looking for clarity. Which leads me to this question for all of us. How often and how well do you ask questions for clarity? If you've never been around Pastor Don, our youth guy, he asks questions all the time because he wants to know. He wants to know why you're doing something or how you're doing something. He is asking you not for conflict. He's asking you for clarity, and I so appreciate that about Pastor Don. I'll also tell you what, we had 68 kids, middle school and high school students running through this church overnight Friday into Saturday morning. There was probably a lot of chances for conflict when you have 70 middle school and high schoolers together. But when you ask questions for clarity, you actually decrease the chance of conflict. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about and unpack conflict, pressures, tensions, struggles, strains, oppositions. Now, to get where we're going, we have to go back and lead into it. Here's what I mean. Remember when there was only a couple things that bothered you or angered you? Like when you got cut off in traffic, that might have been one thing. Like we get cut off, it angers you, and you shake the tall finger and hope they don't notice you that you're from church, and that angered you, right? Or the other things that would anger you when someone's cell phone rang in a movie theater. This happened to me 2 weeks ago. My brother-in-law and I were at a movie, watching a movie together, and somebody's cell phone rang. First of all, who still has a ringer on in 2024? I just boggles my mind that people still use the ringer. You have Vibrate and a smartwatch. You always know when your phone's ringing, all right? Ringers are obsolete. And if I've just offended you, good. But not only did this person's phone ring, they picked it up and answered it and had the conversation. Hey, not much, just sitting in the movie, what's up? Yeah, I should be done in about an hour and 20 minutes. I'm like, goodness gracious, like, shut up. Like, that's how I felt. It kind of angered me a little bit. There was things that used to anger us. Mullets and mustaches. Now it's normal, right? It used to anger us. This used to anger me. Now it's normal. I'm like, what is happening to our world? This used to be somebody with a little camera around their neck, like a tourist. That's what they used to wear. Now it's just everyday occurrences. There's different things that used to anger us. Anybody remember this? When you would take a picture and then you would go and get it exposed and you're like, that was my finger. Or you lost it. That would anger us. There was just big ticket items. Remember when they used to be able to smoke on an airplane? This one probably angered some parents when they instituted the seatbelt laws. No longer could the kids ride willy-nilly in the back of the station wagon, right? There was some things, big ticket things, if you can go back to the 80s, that angered a large group of people. It was not just one or two people that were getting angry. It was a large group. Parents, when Satan showed up in MTV form, this angered you. Like, my parents would not let us watch MTV. It was from the devil. The anti-establishment, right? Nirvana was on there, and Guns N' Roses was on there, that bad anti-establishment music. And yet there was some other events that happened that probably angered some people. The last Mount St. Helens eruption, thousands of livestock, vegetation, hundreds of thousands of acres destroyed. The environmentalists got angry. There was Chernobyl. Anger, like there was anger that rose up across the world. Different things like the Exxon Valdez oil spill angered a large group of people. Now, I'm going somewhere with this. Follow me. You're talking millions of species that were just destroyed. Their habitation was just gone. And it could have been prevented, right? There was just these things that angered us. Iraq invading Iran, the Beirut bombing, the Falklands War, the Berlin Wall. There was major catastrophic events that angered us. And yet today, it's not big things that anger us. It's just small, little, almost insignificant things, like losing an argument, and we fly off the handle. Or losing a bet, and we fly off the handle. Or somebody getting vaxxed that shouldn't have, in your opinion, or somebody not that should have. I watched this destroy families at odds with each other because of a difference of opinion. We got so angry and so irritated, and we've been angry and irritated for the past 4 years. And now we have to live with it for the next 8 months, right? It is, people get so angry. But when was the last time you stopped to hear somebody else's viewpoint? Listen, I'm adopted. If anybody is pro-life, it's Dan. But when someone says that they're pro-choice, my first question is, help me understand. I want to hear why you believe that. And I want to understand your thinking. And then I have hopefully an opportunity to respond with like, listen, if my biological mom had given me up or had aborted me and not given me up for adoption, my adopted mom wouldn't even be alive because I was able to give her a kidney as an adopted kid. So I am pro-life. All right, you're going to hear that from the pulpit and from Dan, but I support and love, and I come alongside people who have a difference of opinion than I do, and I don't blast them and crucify them. I try to seek clarity and understand where they're coming from and why they're coming from that side. That's what Jesus did all through the Bible, which then leads to this question: how well and how often do you ask questions for clarity? Because here's what happens. You hold near and dear that value, whatever that value is. And that view and that stance and that moral and that conviction and that guideline. And if they don't hold that to the same level that you do, you write them off. You cancel them. You ignore them. You blast them. And some of us have been living in a perpetual state of anger. And I'll even say this. I think some of us enjoy being angry. You're like, no, that Dan, you're talking nonsense. That's the knee talking. That's the pain. No. I actually believe some people like being angry because they do nothing to change their view, their posture, their position, or their understanding from the other person or the other side. And they only surround themselves with people who think like them and dress like them and act like them and vote like them and do all the things that they do. People actually, I think, like being angry. Like if you only, listen, I'm going to ruffle feathers and that's okay. If you only watch Fox News and you don't listen to any other news source to hear a different slant, you probably have a problem with conflict. If you only watch CNN and you hate everything about Fox or Newsmax, you probably have a problem with conflict because you have to have understanding from the other side. Why do they think the way they think? Why do they behave the way they behave? Why do they vote the way they vote? Why do they present themselves the way they present themselves? And what's happened in the Christian church is we've lowered our questioning for clarity, and we've raised our anger for crucifixion. If you don't agree with me, you're wrong. Ask yourself this question when conflict arises. Do I want to make a point or do I want to make a difference? Do I want to be right or do I want to actually try to make a difference and an impact in the person's life that I'm engaging with? Let me give you a real life example. My brother-in-law is my best friend. He is a 5-point Calvinist. Now, for those who you are not theologians, let me help you understand. He fully believes, that my brother-in-law fully believes, my best friend, that he had no choice in his salvation, that he was predestined before the beginning of the world that he would be saved, that God predestined some for heaven, which also means by default he predestined some for hell, that some would reject him. I'm a 5-point Arminian, if there is such a thing. I actually believe that we have free will. I believe that if the Lord does not want anyone to perish, according to 2 Peter 3:9, if the Lord does not want anyone to perish, which means spend eternity apart from him, why would he predestine some to heaven and predestine some for hell? It doesn't make sense in my mind. You know what I love doing? I love having conversations with Brian because it challenges my thinking. Why do I actually believe what I believe? How can I firm up or shore up the foundation that I believe that since the beginning of time, at the garden, God gave us free will. Adam, Eve, serpent, free will. You can have it all, just don't eat that. But that's there, and you have to choose not to eat it. I believe in free will as a Wesleyan Arminian. And so when I'm having conversations with Brian, I actually have to ask myself, do I want to make a point or do I want to make a difference? And you know what I love to do sometimes? Not with my brother-in-law. I love to hop online on Facebook, and I love just to watch the arguments. This is me. Right? And I brought enough popcorn for everybody because you can watch some heated arguments on the socials. You can watch people that call themselves Christians just lambaste each other, and you're like, really? It's kind of entertaining. But let me ask, is your anger effective in bringing you more joy? Is your anger effective at bringing your family closer together? Is your anger helping you with your self-control? Is your anger pointing people towards Jesus or away from Jesus? See, how do we keep it together when we have conflict? We have to recognize that when conflict arises, we have a choice. We can make our point, or we can make a difference. If your anger is driving the conversation, you're going to crash. If your anger is directing the conversation, you're going to crash. If your anger is determining your attitude and your actions, which then direct and drive the conversation, you're going to crash. Is your anger making you more like Jesus? Does it create love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, faithfulness, and self-control? Let me answer that for you. Spoiler alert, no. It doesn't. In fact, that's why we looked at in week 1 of this series in James. James writes to his audience, his readers, he says, listen, be very quick to listen, be slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger doesn't produce the righteousness that God desires. Human anger doesn't produce righteousness. And God desires righteousness from us. You know what I love? I love the fact that this verse tells me in the middle of conflict, we can still have righteousness. In the middle of disagreements, we can still have righteousness. In the middle of tension and conflict and pressure, we can still have righteousness. See, righteousness is a big word that we get confused with perfection. It doesn't mean that. Righteousness means that we live or we act in accordance to the Word of God. And that we live without guilt, that we're not purposely sinning. And when we're not purposely sinning, we're living in purity. There are seasons of our lives where we actually live in righteousness. And we have this view of it like it's perfection or it's unattainable. No. It's attainable for all of us, righteousness is. In fact, that's why Jesus said, be righteous as I am righteous, right? Be holy as I am holy. He's not setting you up to fail. Try to do this, but you're never going to achieve it. Haha, suckers. He wouldn't do that. What he's saying is, if you live in accordance with the word, with the law, and you live without guilt, which means you're not actively pursuing sin, and you're living in this state of purity, you're living in a state of righteousness. And then James, a little bit later in the same book, in James chapter 3, so he's about halfway through his letter now, he says, wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. It's then peace-loving, and it's considerate, and it's submissive. It's full of mercy and good fruit. It's impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. You want to know how to be righteous? Reap peace. You can be right or you can make a difference. And there's a difference between righteousness of God and righteousness of self. There's a difference between godly righteousness and self-righteousness. Because as Christians, you know what it's really do? It's really easy to criticize their foul language and ignore our spiritual pride. As Christians, it's really easy to criticize their sexual sin and ignore our gluttony. As Christians, it's really easy to point out their flaws and their faults and ignore our gossip and complaining. See, righteousness is not about behavior modification. This is what the church taught for years. We'll just act better and just live better and just serve better and just give better and just be better and just love better. Righteousness is not about behavior modification. Righteousness is about being right with God, following the word, living without guilt into a state of purity. It's attainable for all of us. See, righteousness at the core is being right with God. If you want to know if you're right with God, ask yourself these couple questions. Am I changing so others will think better of me? Or am I changing because Holy Spirit has convicted me and I can't keep living the way I am? One is about godly righteousness, one is about self-righteousness. Am I changing just so others will think better of me? Am I changing so others will just see me differently? Or am I really changing because I want Holy Spirit to see me differently? One is self-righteousness, one is godly righteousness. Am I changing just how others will view me and they'll look at me and how they'll think of me and perceive me? Or am I changing because I have new values and new convictions and new morals? So when it comes to conflict and how do we keep it together in conflict, I want to give you two thoughts. Here's thought number one. Lower your expectations of others. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive. You look at that and you're like, really? Shouldn't we be raising the bar? Shouldn't we be calling them to a higher standard, a higher way of living? I want you to lower your expectations of others because others are human. It's interesting. I didn't plan it this week that this point would actually have a practical application on a Sunday morning. I had to apologize to the worship team today. Monday morning, I came into the office, typed up, worked through, prayed through, played through the worship set, sent it off to Jason, who was helping lead. I'm like, what do you think? He's like, I like it. Let's go for it. And then I didn't think about it again till Friday when one of our worship team members said, are we getting a worship set this week, Dan? I'm like, dang it, I forgot to send it out. I'm human. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to fall short. And I had to apologize. I'm sorry. That was my fault, guys. I'll own it. We're human, right? We have to lower our expectations. Listen, of course they're going to forget your birthday. Of course they're going to forget your anniversary. Of course they're going to forget to call you back or email you back or text you back or DM you back or pigeon carry you back. Like, they're going to forget to get back to you. Of course they're going to lie to you. They're human. Parents, of course your kids are going to lie to you. We don't want them to. We want better for them and better from them, but if they're going to do that, they're human. They're going to see what they can get away with. Of course they're going to disappoint you. They're human. I think one of the greatest conflicts occurs in our lives because we have a heightened expectation on others that we don't even have on ourselves. It's real quiet in here. I don't know if it's because I'm sitting. But one of the greatest conflict in our lives occurs because we have a heightened expectation on them that we don't even have on ourselves. Oh, I can't believe they did that. Oh, I can't believe she said that. I don't understand why he would do that. I mean, I went to their party and I bought them a gift and they didn't come to my party and they didn't buy me a gift. They're human. They're going to mess up. They're going to fall short. They're going to disappoint because sinners do sinful things. Sinners do sinful things. It's interesting. Paul was writing to one of his buddies, one of his little proteges, a guy named Timothy. And he's writing this second letter to Timothy, and he says this. He says, I want you to know this, Timothy, that in the last days, it's going to be very difficult times. Now, I've had a lot of questions since 2020. Are we in the end times? I don't know. I bet you during World War I, they asked the very same question. And then a couple years later in World War II, they asked the very same question. And then in Vietnam, they asked the same questions. I don't know if we're in the end times. But I read this verse, I'm like, maybe. And Paul's writing to Timothy, and he says this, in the last days, it's going to be difficult because people will love only themselves and their money. And they will be boastful, and they will be proud, and they will scoff at God, and they will be disobedient to their parents, and they will be ungrateful. And they will consider nothing sacred. And you're like, is he talking about 2024 right now? This can't be old. This can't be old writing. This can't be like the New Testament. This has to be 2024. And they will be unloving and unforgiving, and they will slander one another. They will have no self-control, and they will be cruel, and they will hate what is good. They will betray their friends, and they will be reckless, and they will be puffed up with pride, and they will love pleasure rather than God. And they will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. Stay away from people like that. And I read that, and I'm like, why am I shocked when people disappoint me? You're shocked when they don't text you back or treat you right or speak highly of you or defend you? We shouldn't be shocked. We should actually lower our expectations on other people because they're sinful and they're going to do sinful things. And I'm just going to tell you, at some point, and you're like, you already have, Dan, I'm going to let you down. At some point, I'm going to say something. I'm going to do something. I'm not going to say something that I should, or I'm not going to do something that you expected me to, or I'm going to wear something or not wear something, and you're like, Dan, you failed me. Yes, it's going to happen. Here's my only ask. Don't say Jesus did it to you. And don't say the church did it to you. Because I ain't Jesus and I ain't the church. It's sad when people, because of one person's behavior or one person's actions, write off Jesus. But what would happen if we just lowered some of our expectations on other people? What if we lowered our expectations on our spouses and on our kids and on our neighbors and on our bosses and on our employees to be perfect because they can't be, and just ask them to be them and come alongside of them? Now, I'm not encouraging you and I'm not telling you to lower your morals and your ethics and your values. I'm not saying that. I'm saying lower your expectations. And when you do that, you'll have a better chance of keeping it together during conflict. In 2018, our counselor, I love our counselor. My wife and I go to counseling every month, and it's literally saved our marriage. It's been the best thing for us. And if you're not in counseling, I would encourage you to get in counseling if you think you don't need it. You do. It's amazing. I love it. And we were going through in our marriage, not Kim and I, but in our marriage and our relationships with other people, we were going through and processing some deep hurt and betrayal that we had experienced in a relationship. It was a relationship that we had thought would probably never fall apart. It was a relationship we thought that would be there forever. Very, very, very close friends. And there was some betrayal and some hurt. And we were processing it with our counselor, and our counselor said this. And it was so profound, and it's almost the foundation for this teaching. It's this foundation for this concept. He said this. He said, Dan, the behavior that they're experiencing and that you're experiencing from them, their behavior is consistent with themselves. Why would you expect different when they've not shown you they've changed or that they want to change? The behavior they're exhibiting is congruent with who they are. Don't expect any different. Listen, when he said that to Kim and I about the relationship, it just gave this relief valve. Oh, I am expecting a different behavior, but until they show that they want to change or are willing to change, I'm putting an expectation on them to act or say a certain thing or act a certain way that they're never going to meet because they're being congruent with who they really are. Divisive. Their behavior is consistent with themselves. It's congruent to who they are. Don't expect any different. Jesus continually lowered his expectations of others and their behavior, and yet called them to higher living. He lowered his expectations and simultaneously offered them something else. Think about the woman at the well. Man, it's so hard not to stand and preach. Because if you think about the woman at the well, if you don't know the narrative of the woman at the well, Jesus is on his way from A to B, stops at Samaria at a well, high noon, peak heat of the day. The disciples, they go off, they want biscuits and gravy. They're off to the store to get the biscuits and gravy. They're going to come back. They're not there yet. Jesus is there at the well, and a woman approaches. Jesus strikes up a conversation. First off, that's taboo. You don't talk to a woman at a well without the woman's husband present. So Jesus is breaking a rule. He's breaking a law. He's doing that, right? Jews, Samaritans hate each other. Now he's breaking another rule. You don't associate with people of other races and ethnicities, and you don't do that. That's just taboo. So now he's breaking multiple laws. Strikes up a conversation with this woman at the well. And the bottom line is that she's a sinful woman. She's had multiple husbands, and the man that she was shacking up with currently wasn't even her husband. Taboo, breaking the law. And yet, get this, Jesus doesn't look at her with judgmental eyes or with condemnation. Jesus doesn't go, the guy you're sleeping with right now is not your husband? Oh, I can't have any of your sin rubbing off on me. I need to get out of here really quickly. He doesn't say, man, I can't wait for them to get back with biscuits and gravy because we're going to have some gossip time over lunch. Prayer time. He doesn't say, ma'am, you're living in sin, and when I die on the cross and I die for the sins of the world, you can't be included. He doesn't say any of that. He lowered his expectations, met her where she was at, and offered her something that nobody else had ever offered her, living water. What I offer you, he says, is living water. You'll never thirst again. You'll never look for fulfillment anywhere else again if you really put your hope in me and your trust in me and your faith in me. You see, he lowered his expectations of her to be perfect and raised his grace level for her. And if you want to keep it together when you have conflict, lower your expectations of other people, but raise your level of grace. Raise your grace level towards people. At the beginning of the month, or at the beginning of the year in January, I made a statement, kind of an off-the-hand statement. It was kind of fun, an all skate. Anybody ever done an all skate? We know what an all skate is, right? Where the DJ at the wedding says, everybody on the dance floor, or you're at the roller rink. All right, I need everybody on the roller rink floor, get your roller skates on. All skate. All right, can you appease me? I got a bum knee. Can we do an all skate? Can everybody just raise your hands just for a second? We're doing all skate. Thank you for making the GIMP feel good. I appreciate it very much. All right, now everybody keep your hands up. All right, this is an all skate. And we're going to keep our hands up for every one of us who've never sinned. All right, we're going to keep our hands up. If you've never lied, keep your hands up. Dang it. If you've never stolen, if you've never judged somebody, if you've never envied, if you've never lusted, if you've never been prideful, if you've never taken the Lord's name in vain, if you've never dishonored your parents, if you've never gossiped about someone, if you've never been malicious with your thoughts or your actions, if you've never gone over the speed limit, we're called to live according to the surrender to the laws of the land. If you've never farted in an elevator. Listen, you might think that's not a sin. For the rest of us, for that last 30 seconds of Taco Bell smell, that is a sin, hands down, right? Listen, no one's hands are still up. They're just not. Because all of us have sinned. And all of us need grace. But sometimes we are not willing to give it to other people. because they don't hold the same standards or the same values or the same morals or the same convictions, and I hold this and that, and they don't, and we don't show grace. But the gospel is summed up in Ephesians 2:8-9. It is by grace that you have been saved. It is the grace of God. It is a gift of God. And it's nothing you do. It's nothing you earn. It's nothing you achieve. You don't earn it and you can't achieve it, so you can't boast about it, is what Paul said. We are God's handiwork. We are created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in us in advance for us to do. That gets into the theology that my brother and I talk about right here. It's by grace that you've been saved. You don't earn it. Listen, you don't earn salvation. You don't even deserve salvation. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to be honest. I don't deserve salvation. I don't deserve God's kindness. I don't deserve God's mercy. I don't deserve God's compassion. I don't deserve God's forgiveness. The only thing I deserve is death and separation from Jesus. That's what I deserve. But grace. And when we forget what we've come from, and when we forget where we've come from, we minimize the grace that we've received. And we open the door for spiritual pride. Let me say that again. When you forget what you've come from and when you forget where you've come from, you minimize or you moderate the grace that you've actually received, and you open the door for spiritual pride. But grace, the grace of God. I think about the story of the woman at the well. But I also think about the story and the narrative, the gospel account of the woman caught in the act of adultery. You might be familiar with it. If not, let me give you a summation. And the woman caught in the act of adultery, Jesus is standing in the temple courtyards. There's an angry mob of religious men who had caught a woman in the act of adultery. They were waiting, watching, hoping that she would mess up. Followed her to a house, her house, his house, brothel, we don't know. Caught her in the act of adultery, dragged her out of the house, probably naked or half naked, and set her in front of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and exposed her and humiliated her. And they asked Jesus, well, she was doing it with the wrong person. The law says we can kill her. What do you say? And Jesus didn't say this, but he said this. Did he want to make a point or did he want to make a difference? This is what Jesus says without saying it. He said, can you lower your expectations on her? She's lost. She's searching. She's feeling hopeless, and this man that she's sleeping with makes her feel acceptance. This man gives her worth. He makes her feel special. Of course she's going to sin. Of course she's going to sleep with him. And maybe instead of stoning her, we should be surrounding her. So, lower your stone. Drop your rock. Go ahead. And if you're not willing to drop your rock, to lower your stone, then you that's never sinned, you that's never messed up, you that's never lusted, never sworn, never stolen, never gossiped, never coveted, you get first dibs to throw your stone. And if you read the narrative one by one, starting with the older, a little bit more wiser people, they begin to drop their stones. They drop their rocks. And they leave. And I wonder if Jesus was looking at them and going, yeah, you can make a point, and you can literally take your rocks and kill her in front of hundreds of people. You have the right to do that. Or you can make a difference in her life. See, when it comes to conflict, you can make your point, or you can make a difference in their life. You can lower your expectation and raise your grace level. See, the reason I said at the very beginning of the message that I believe that this teaching can actually change all of our lives, all of us, is because all of us have conflict in our lives. No one's immune from that. And if all of us take these two thoughts, lower your expectation and raise your grace level, you can actually make a difference in someone's life. Instead of stoning people, we can surround people, come alongside people who might not think like us, who might not act like us, who might not smell like us, who might not dress or act or vote like us, who might not even come to church like us. So you can always make a point, or you can make a difference.